This is Millie Salmon in the Infinite Shop, Chapter 11, The Almost Meal. The shop hosts a party, and Millie is finally invited, and she gets to learn the game Teacup. I'm the author, Ray Dubicki, and I'm really excited to read this story to you. I've been looking forward to sharing this chapter for a while. You can join Millie Salmon on Patreon or find more at milliesalmon.com. And you can follow this podcast and other stories on social media at Infinite Shop Limited. Chapter 11, The Almost Meal. Saturday morning at Room and Board's game shop went very slowly. Millie was counting the minutes before the evening's event, which made things kind of long. But Pats was also being a tool as game master. He had meticulously planned a very elaborate castle raid, only to have it short-circuited by the teamwork for Hans and Louise, 7th graders from the Catholic school who the league assigned to their table. Pats had shot them a look like he was going to rip out their throats, then ended up making them roll their way out of a series of curses that can be generously described as horrifyingly gratuitous. And all of them had to sit through the slog as he doled out the punishment. Millie got back home at 3 to hear her mother on the phone. "Thank you, Claire, but we don't need a babysitter." Mom turned to see Millie standing in the doorway. "Someone to come over and hang out with Millie tonight. She will actually be joining us at the show this evening." As quickly as Millie considered getting mad at Mom, suggesting she needed a babysitter, she let the feeling dissipate so as to not risk the evening. Millie got off her coat and bag and threw them on the side. "Did you ever go to a show, or were all these cover-ups for the shop?" "We're not covering up the shop. And of course we went out to do things that are not appropriate for you to join us. You will still not be seeing an R-rated movie before we do, so if we'd like something more than mindless robot flicks, you're staying home. But sometimes there is Brentonne." "Do I get to know more about this Brentonne thing?" Mom laughed to herself. "Yeah, you get to know. It's been a while since Dad and I called it anything different from the something or the show. It's just dinner with some friends." "And you kept this a secret. It sounds a little boring." "Boring as in you don't want to attend?" "No, boring as in why not just call it dinner?" "Well, Brentonne is an old word that literally translates to the almost meal. It's usually kind of an insult, like you're focused on how wonderful some dream meal is that you aren't enjoying what food you have right now. It's how most Americans treat Thanksgiving." "So you're making fun of a dream dinner?" "Kind of. But here we're trying to remember to have a good time, regardless. It comes from a place of love. And the other reason to be quiet about it is that it's at the shop with acolytes and other people who know about the shop and how it works. People from all over the place. Easier to just say we're going out." As slowly as Pat's made the morning's death match, Saturday afternoon trickled by in the same way a rock does not. Normally, this would be fantastic news. Saturdays move far too quickly. You leave school on Friday, and the next thing you know, it's Monday morning and people are yelling at you to get out of bed. This Saturday, things could not come quickly enough for Millie. The sun inched in a low arc across the gray sky, and Millie watched it most of the way. By the time Mom yelled down the hallway for her to start getting dressed, Millie appeared, completely ready, hair done, shoes on, ready to walk out the door. Dad laughed. Millie sat on the couch for another 40 agonizing minutes as the room filled with the fog of early evening showers and the smell of perfume and cologne. When they did this normally, Millie couldn't wait for them to leave so she could get to the important business of convincing Claire that it was time to eat candy and stay up for the late night kung fu movie. Now, she couldn't wait for them to whisk her away to this secret grown up party that would undoubtedly feature secret intrigues and waltzes with the prince on a faraway planet. Where was this coming from? This wasn't some princess ball. They were going to dinner. She'd been at dinner before. Mom and Dad took her to dinner at the neighbors' houses lots of times. Mom and Dad emerged together. She, in her nice blue flowered pantsuit with no sleeves, gave Dad the size up. Somehow, his slightly too bright orange shirt with an unmatching tie passed. They sat next to each other in the overstuffed love seat. They had never done that before. Mom started. "Millie, before we go, we have a couple things to discuss." Okay. This didn't normally happen before dinner with Earthbound friends. Maybe this would be different. Dad took his turn. "There's going to be a lot of different kinds of food. You may not fully believe it when you see it, but all of it's edible. So standard rules apply." Millie recited, "Try lots. Take what I'm going to eat. Don't put on some face that insults everyone involved. I can do that. No wasties, no facies." The rule was imposed a very long time ago. Mom continued, "There will be parts to the evening. There are courses to dinner. Between each, people will be talking and laughing. At some point, somebody will tell a story." "Most likely, Siggy Wistold, after his third pint of slosh," Dad injected. Mom sighed. "Most likely, but you have to understand what these stories are. They are not about the story being told so much as the performance of telling them and the interaction of the audience. There will be points where the audience is expected to participate." What your mother is trying to say is that during Siggy's tale, somebody's going to throw a very large, uncooked fish across the room. It will likely be your father. It will likely be me that throws a very large, uncooked fish across the room at Siggy with the strict purpose of hitting him in the face. That was a very important part of the story and vitally important to properly telling it. Millie noted that this is not going to be the same kind of dinner with friends. "I don't know if I'll understand until I see it." "Oh, you absolutely will not. I can't say I do." Mom looked a little bit sad, then piercingly angry at her husband. "But what I'm saying is you should enjoy the show and enjoy the company of the people you will be meeting. Don't feel pressure to participate because there is a choreography that you may not immediately see." Then Mom and Dad looked at each other, preparing for the last thing. Dad leaned forward and said, "We know you've done very well keeping the shop secret for the last few months, and you've kept the true nature of the shop secret very well. Coming to this dinner will give you two more secrets you are expected to keep. The people at dinner have known us for a very long time, so they know us by very formal names. You still haven't explained things about my birthday. You're telling me that Jules and Stony Salmon are not your real names. You have aliases. Are you on the run from the space police, Benji?" Dad bristled. "Don't call me that. And we're not on the run. You'll hear people call me Professor and your mother Doctor." "Really?" Millie's response may have come out more doubtful than she wanted it to. "Yes, really. And we're going to be honest with you. It would be very difficult for us to live near the shop if people outside of acolytes and our knowledgeable friends at this dinner were able to connect our lives here to our formal positions." While the shop was never the exact same 2 visits in a row, Millie had never seen it like it was this evening. It wasn't the warren of rooms and branching hallways anymore. It seemed regular, like a living room that suddenly appeared after the mean mess of living got put into its proper place, which was exactly what never happened at the shop. So they might as well have been on the other side of the universe. She wondered if all the extra stuff was up in piles in the machine room, like coats shoved into Mom and Dad's room when they had her birthday party at their apartment. There was little bits of evidence of the shop's day job here and there. The shorter bookshelves were arranged and neatly put together, decorative literary walls. They broke up clusters of people standing and talking, and their tops caught drinks that had been put down. Comic boxes were closed and peeking out from under long and mismatching tablecloths, their tables holding up plates of food around the sides of the room. It was a dozen tables, each overflowing with different dishes and an eye-popping variety of colors. Each had polite signs taped to the wall above specifying contents. There were veggies, fruits, mobile veggies, flesh of the land, flesh of the sea, and flesh of the flesh. But it was the one labeled Hope that concerned Millie. The rest of the tables, usually used for books, were cleared and surrounded with chairs. They snaked around tight corners of the room like a long parade. There were 30 tables, each with 6 or 7 chairs to a side. It was still the shop, but it was so much larger. Not even the front desk was in the same spot. It had been replaced by a table covered in desserts, some shining, some sparkling, some shining, sparkling, and orbiting around larger cakes. A few had their covers pulled backwards to reveal a stolen treat. Millie carried the platter of their contribution, a plate piled high with something that looked remarkably like turmeric lychee squares. She sat it on the last clear spot on the table. Most importantly, the shop was full of people. It wasn't as packed as the good cafe across Barber Avenue got every morning, or the bar a block down got on nights when the midsummer baseball games started late. There were a lot of people, but the space was comfortably full, not crowded. People jostled only if they wanted to bump into someone else. People comfortably leaned in close, or expanded to include others in their story. And now that room had more stories than when it was full of books. Millie walked slowly deeper into the changed shop with Mom and Dad each a step behind her. People at the tables looked at Millie, then up at her parents, then down at Millie again, before breaking into huge grins and peppering Stoney and Jules with questions. "This is her? How long has it been? Could you have told us that she'd be coming?" Millie was roughly picked up by an immense woman. Huge shocks of orange hair erupted from under the edges of a knit skull cap woven with golden coins bearing carved dwarvish faces. Her goatee was bound in 2 places with ties dangling similar coins. She let out a bellowing roar. Stoney stepped in quickly. "Sluggy, she's not versed in the Batar Suth child-dipping ritual. She hasn't read her part of the Shell Ordos, and it's 2 weeks early." Only the last thing seemed to convince Sluggy that it was time to put Millie down. She looked kind of disappointed. "Well, that's going to have to get formalized promptly. She's already far too old to not know the ways." "We're raising her right, Sluggy." Stoney used her nice voice, but Millie could hear that she was defensive. "Don't worry about that. She'll get the important rituals taken care of in time." "How are they rituals if you do them the way you want?" There was a lot of demand in the word howl and reverence in the word rituals. Sluggy might be a stickler, but seemed generally concerned about Millie's welfare, regardless of the dangers of child dipping. "We're raising her right, Sluggy. How are those 3 boys of yours?" Sluggy made a sound that kicked like the wrong end of a shotgun. "Those boys will kill me! Rarl actually took out a hammer and nails to attach Tarl's feet to the floor, all because Tarl's team won the hard patch tournament." As Mom ducked off with Sluggy, it was Grandpa that next saved Millie from the swirl. "Did you ever think you'd see the shop like this?" "No, not this many people, not this open." Well, there should be some people you know and some fun stuff that you can see. Does it involve child dipping? Unfortunately, no. That's truly a beautiful ceremony, usually done on a night with two full moons at the height of winter. It really highlights the ice water and the snow spiders. Following Grandpa, Millie was introduced, a little less roughly, to people in the corners of the room. Grandpa pointed out Homie, who was holding a drink and chatting with someone next to the dessert table. He stole one of the squares from the plate Millie had carried in before noticing that he was being introduced. He waved from across the room, then ate the dessert in one bite. In the extra room, a dozen younger people were sitting around a folding table, or they were standing around the people sitting around the folding table. There were watchers and there were players. The watchers looked amused, and the players looked wet. Everybody, I'd like to introduce you to Millie Salmon. I think you know Firth. Everybody here is school age at one level or another. They will let you know who they are. He raised his voice to cover the din. Because they all remember the well-known story of the dual catcher and the hive mind. Millie did not know this well-known story, but apparently the rest of the room did. Under cover of pure silence, each of the students came up and introduced themselves. With so many new types of faces approaching her in fast sequence, the flood of names passed through Millie's memory and right out the other side. When they were done, Grandpa generally announced, I'm sure the Five Spirit is pleased with you tonight. Firth waited until last. Hi, Millie, he said, sticking out his hand. I'm Firth Claw. I'm a freeman of the planet Tosker. Millie took his hand and shook it slowly. Firth smiled at her. The last few years, seeing him behind the desk came back to her. The bizarre way he moved his hands when talking, the inappropriate clothing to the time of the year, even the uncomfortable way he smiled. It all seemed just weird. Now it seemed so alien. Ah, Firth, Grandpa said. It prompted Millie to release their handshake. Where's your father? I want him to see Millie. He has asked. Firth's father was ceiling-scrapingly tall and just about as wide from shoulder to shoulder. He wore a simple white shirt that could have projected a movie on, but he folded himself over and took a knee to talk with Millie eye to eye. He was the first adult to have done this all night. She liked Leifter Claw. Leifter asked about her classes, whether she was helping her father around the house, and if she had heard any good songs recently. Millie answered them all. Then he stood and proudly looked at Firth. So you're going to try and be the next acolyte. Are you beginning your preparations? I'm not really sure. I haven't been told a lot of things. Well, they do it to everyone. But acolyte is something for you to think about, Leifter said, regaining his full height. Firth cannot be here forever, especially after he starts university in the uplift season. He will be following his mother's footsteps into astrophysics. The giant Leifter put his hand on his son's shoulder. They'll be searching for other stars at the edge of the galaxy and looking deep into our galactic neighbor. He could obviously spend hours talking more about Firth, but Leifter mentioned that it was time for him to return to the boring side of the room and, more importantly, let them get back to the parts of enjoying their evening without this strange man around. It is tremendously good to see you. We are not going to let your father keep you under wraps for another 10 years. So it was just the two of them standing at that side of the room. Firth was a little twitchy, seeming like he had something to say, but Millie spoke first. So, Millie asked Firth, what are they doing? She pointed at the table where some had returned to playing. Oh, that's Teacup. It's a game. This one's 12 pieces. They're playing 50 piece in the other room, but that's been illegalized on some worlds. With blindingly fast hand motions, the four at the table moved a set of cups and plates and utensils and teacups. Paying just a little bit of attention was not enough. Only after a moment with the pattern did Millie realize they were all taking and putting in the same direction, counterclockwise, until one of the players flipped over a dish and the whole process reversed. Each player stacked up 2 more items and one of them put down a fork. Firth started narrating the players' names. Josie flipped another plate and the direction reversed again. As fast as Kendral had accumulated 2 dishes, a cup, and a fork, she lost them to her twin brother Drawl on her left. Both had lost a couple of rounds. The fur across their faces and shoulders was wet and matted down. Millie leaned into Firth. Why are they only using 2 hands? You agree on the number of limbs at the beginning of the night. This table is running a no-tails rule. Otherwise, Altan and Josie would have to find extra limbs somewhere. 2 more circuits, and something really crashed. All the play stopped. Josie looked over the table. "Oh, come on. Decide faster," Altan said. Josie didn't want to take that kind of lip. "Fine," she said. "I'll take all 3 pieces from your plate." And she did. This put Altan in a severe hole. It took only 1 more lap before all the clanking settled, and Altan was left holding a teacup with no place for it to go. He gave Josie a look of doom. "I'll take this under deep protest." "I'm sure you do," said Josie, "but now's the time to dump." They started to titter and build until the call of dump filled the corner of the room. Altan gave one last grunt of objection and poured the water in the teacup over his head. It flattened the looping curls in his blonde hair and darkened an even wider circle across the gray back of his shirt. All the watchers cheered. "Why don't they just play with cards?" Millie asked Firth. "Cards? They're no fun," Firth said. "I had the worst time figuring out what you all were doing with those little stacks of pictures. They all are the same shape and the same size. The only difference is the pictures, but not really. There's only a couple of pictures, and they don't make any sense. But what are cards? Just a way to put things in order. Symbols for something else." Teacup says, "Who cares about symbols?" and went directly to the literal game. "Okay, so it looks easy enough. When do I play?" "I'm not sure you know what you're asking for. I know I'm going to get water dumped on me a few times, but it's just a game, and it's just water." Josie heard her. "Oh, I think you're going to be good at this. Take my chair." Josie pushed back from the table. She stood to tower over the table and the others in the room. Her knee-length braid of fire-red hair dipped as she bent down to flip the chair around and pat the seat. "It's all yours." Drawl objected to Josie. "You haven't lost yet. You can't leave dry." "That's more your failure than mine. Let's see her take this streak further." So Millie took her spot. "I don't know that I'll do that well. I've never played." Josie was unalarmed. "You're going to crush them. It's going to be fantastic." Kendral stacked the piles in the center of the table and each took 1. Being opposite the dealer, Millie started. She passed a flipped dish to Drawl. Altan hissed, "Oh, terrible move." Millie already figured that out, though. She heard Firth's teeth clench behind her, but to his credit, he said nothing. "How?" "You don't have any more of those," jeered Altan. "And he can use it as a reverse. And an opening move to give that away. Just quit now." "No, I'm okay." Drawl shrugged and took his turn, passing a cup to Kendral. Then a spoon to Altan, and that same spoon to Millie. Then a large plate to Drawl. Then a spun cup, and everyone took a turn passing. And the game sped up. Each pass was met with another pass in midair once the next person saw what was coming. As quickly as hands moved, alliances were formed and broken. Kendral tried to feed napkins and a glass to Drawl, but it was stopped by Millie and reversed by Altan. Altan tried to pass 2 plates through to Kendral, but Drawl made everyone pass the opposite way. She couldn't hold on to pieces because too many would put her over points. She couldn't get rid of all the pieces because she'd default lose, so she had to work to keep few enough pieces to keep the game going, but had to give enough away to keep the game going. It was brilliant to give the illusion of knowing what your opponents have, but making each player work against themselves. It was good enough to teach at next week's game league. And she was keeping up with the motions. It was all going well enough except for the unending yammering of Altan and Drawl. They honestly didn't shut up once while hands were flying, but they weren't talking with Millie and Kendral. The boys were talking past the girls, pretending they weren't even there. It was a foolish thing to do. So Millie shifted another plate out of her accumulated stack and passed it to Drawl. This infuriated Altan enough to snap him out of his mind lock with Drawl. You keep doing that. Do you have a question on how to play? Are you offering a suggestion, coach? No, I'm trying to stop you from making such ugly moves and ruining my enjoyment of the game. The motion stopped. It was Millie's turn. She looked at Altan. Then I do have a question. Millie flipped her fork around. How do you find yourself running into this problem so often, Altan? What do you mean? He looked at the lone cup in front of him. By the torn heel, I give up. Everyone cheered as he dumped water over his head. Firth pulled Millie's seat out. Good win and a good time to leave the table. Do you want to claim a chair at dinner? You can sit with your mom and dad, or you can sit between us. Before Millie got out an us who, she felt the presence of someone on her other side. Feminine, a head taller than her, and very well dressed. She was obviously older than any of the students, not because she looked old, but she moved with deliberate motions, dancing through the room like she knew what she was doing. She held out her hand to Millie in fake reintroduction. I'm Dalen Barrel, and it's an honor to know you, and I'm pleased to see you again at an official function and be your companion for the evening. A general announcement of dinner was made by the loudest and peculiarly familiar voice. While she was treading on unsteady ground, this was her first pure surprise of the night. Millie could not see what made such a huge sound until the crowd parted, revealing Mrs. Pitters standing in the middle of the room. To have this familiar egg-shaped old woman among all these crazy new people was unsettling. Millie couldn't attach herself to the familiar look of the shop because that was entirely different. She didn't anchor her brain on the idea of mom and dad carousing with these people she knew were from other worlds, and looking at the people themselves, the strange shapes and colors. Many of them looked just this side of normally proportional, big skull, 2 arms, 2 legs, but that was about the end. And all of them were about to have dinner, so she was riding the weirdness. The swirl started again as everybody took a seat. Millie was at a long table between Firth and Dalen. They sat across from the 4 teacup players. She was back to back with Mom, who was at one of the largest tables across from Dad. Stoney wouldn't have let Millie much further away. When everyone was seated, Mrs. Pitters took the floor again. Dearies, we are about to eat. Good food, strong food. We have tradition. We sing our thanks, whether someone needs to hear those thanks or we need to separate from the bustle that brought us here. We take time to sing. Then, the other surprise. Again, it started with a voice, one that Millie knew very well, one that she tried to impersonate and impress, one that implored her to sing twice and a third time, 3 times a week for years now, as Collins sang over their meal. She had heard Mrs. Collins sing in all languages and all purposes. For her whole life at school, Mrs. Collins' voice could come into Millie's head, where it would bounce around until it found a familiar phrase or beat, allowing the flowers of meanings to explode into 1,000 paths that Millie's mind could follow and find their own meanings. But not here. The shop rules applied. It was translating, writing the meaning on Millie's brain. She couldn't get it wrong because there was nothing wrong to get. The shop was printing the images on her mind, and they were precise. The song was gorgeous. Mrs. Collins sang about homeworlds, wherever each of them came from, how difficult working was, and how welcome it was to have friends. The next verse was a little more broad about how difficult life was and how welcome it was to have lived well. Only when there was a chorus, almost monotone and rhythmic and begging for something more. Third verse, broader still, the difficulty of a cold and unyielding universe and how welcome it was to find someone in it. The begging chorus before the last verse, about a single flower, how difficult it was to hold, but how welcome it was to have seen. Her voice had filled cathedrals and stadiums, and when she sang about the blooming variety of nature, you could hear the pollen on the petals. Here, the begging chorus repeated, but its meaning changed, begging to stay and see. Mrs. Collins finished her song. They all clapped, whistled, hooted, or made their hands squeak against the table to show their appreciation. Millie did all that, but couldn't stay much longer. She excused herself from the table, told Mom she was heading to the bathroom, where she went and promptly threw up. She sat next to the toilet for a minute, then went over to the sink and cleaned up. With shaking hands, she took out her phone. The service was fine. She started typing out a note to Pats. 4 characters in, she repocketed the phone when there was a knock. "How are you feeling?" It was Dalen. "Need some help?" The relief that it wasn't Mom or Dad was enough to unclench her stomach a bit. She opened the door and left the bathroom. "Just not feeling well. I got sick." "Something in your stomach or something else?" "It's not a bug. I'm not sure what it is besides kind of humiliating." "For vomiting?" Dalen waved it off. "You're not going to be the last one to throw up tonight. Vomiting is one of the part of the stories the Midri tells, and he was enjoying himself before even showing up." "There's just something about that song, that singing." "Too many new things." No, not that either. Just the really strange is okay. You're from another world? Fine. You're a giant bug? Great. You're my voice teacher? That's really weird. These old women next to all this new stuff. Dalen smiled at that. "It's so much. I know. I remember." She didn't want Millie to be fatally embarrassed, so she stuck her head in the bathroom and looked for mess or smell. It looked clear. Just in case, Dalen looked under the sink and found some de-stink spray. "Really? There's fresh laundry smell spray under the sink? We have that too." Just another complete not anachronism. It was how familiar Mrs. Collins' voice was, normal lacing through the new. A boat can ride out a storm at sea, but if you tie it to a dock, it'll be battered to pieces. The familiar and the safe became so dangerous when the rest of the world is bucking and full of waves. "I know how she sings. I know how her voice sounds. To have that here," Millie waved around. "Then the shop is doing more." Millie waved her hand in circles. "That was some sort of needle pointing at my brain and yelling, 'Fire!' It just tattooed these pictures into my brain. I can't remember the sound of her singing that song, but I remember the feeling it gave me and the pictures it drew." "Tell me more." "I'm okay with so much else, but having Mrs. Collins in my brain without hearing her voice, that made me sick. It's all too much. I just was not ready for that." "The worst thing," Dalen whispered, "is that you can't unknow this, and you don't want to." Millie whispered, This is a nightmare, but I don't want to wake up. It's hard trying to tie this to the real world, and worse, when you don't have someone to tell. But now you do. She patted Millie on the hand and gave the girl a hug. Are you okay staying? Do you want to get a quick glass of punch before we go to the table? Dalen asked. Yes, please. They got up and went to the beverage table. Millie found some napkins and blew her nose. Dalen flipped the nozzle on a glass jug of hot pink liquid to pour some juice into glasses. It's actually good this isn't a dream. The desserts are beyond anything you ever imagine. Your dad makes these candy squares that are fantastic. Millie snorted again. You've got to be kidding me. No kidding, some kidding, but not right now. Please remember that I've just done all of this myself. I'm here and I can talk to you whenever you would like. Just done all what? You didn't always know about the shop? No, not at all. I got a job with Permatat Bank right out of school. I'm really good at what I do, and your mom paid attention. After I asked some hard questions about the way we handle money, she invited me to one of these dinners and explained it all. And it didn't freak you out? That's what I'm saying. I'm still freaked out, and not all of it makes complete sense. It seems like the supernatural, but there are real numbers and real people who figure it out and make things work. I get to be one of those people working my piece of the larger puzzle. It's pure science, and while that can be terrifying, it's much more spectacular than some silly tablook princess with a dano. Millie didn't know what a tablook or a dano were, but the image of a fairy with a bazooka appeared in her head, and she suddenly wanted to read whatever fairy tales Dalen had growing up. Millie needed to sit down, but wasn't quite ready for dinner. The table with Mom and Dad already had the buffet line packed, so it was going to be a little bit before their turn. She slumped down with her punch at the empty teacup table and breathed through her mouth, trying to taste if her breath was bad. Dalen pulled up the next chair, and they watched the room. While the first wave of people started eating, music was being played. The musicians wore gowns that stretched across their broad, hard chest plates and flowed down and wrapped around their instruments, things that looked like harps turned inside out. Above the chest plates, they looked soft, their faces even drooping side to side as the music played on. One on the left ran a forearm across the strings. Going for a high note, Millie got a glimpse of a bow. On the right, the instrument was picked with a clawed hand. Katja is in the red gown, playing with the bow. Marcho is in the stripes using his claw. They are twins from Biana, a world that is very wet but very dim because its star collapsed. But do you want to know something? Okay. Millie wanted to be unsure, but really wanted to hear anything Dalen had to say. They look like an animal from Dalabrator called a couth. They're squishy with a hard shell. A snail? Sure. Couth don't play instruments. They're tiny animals that get tortured by kids. And Katja and Marcho are absolutely nice people who are easy to talk to and enjoy a nice lunch out. But hardy boils, they look like couth. It's so weird seeing them play music. Millie just stared at Dalen with her mouth open. Her nose started to run and her eyes filled up with tears. She blurted out a loud laugh. She took heaving sobs of laughter and put her head on the table. She pushed away and looked at the now stunned Dalen again, still laughing. Why are you the only person that can say things like this? Are you just wired differently than they are? Dalen smiled at the floor. Maybe. Millie saw some thoughts flip through Dalen's head. Sometimes the things people go through, well, they get rewired. They start out at a spot where they could have understood you. They grew from something that wasn't all that different from you. Maybe I just haven't been rewired. I don't want you to get rewired, but it kind of happens as you live, right? I think that's what happened to Mom and Dad. They built this place and met all these people, but then I come along and everything changes. I can't blame them, even if I hate it sometimes." Millie watched Dalen's expression go through another cycle before the woman sat up and smiled, then laughed. "Well, that's a lot of understanding of your parents that I still don't have for mine. I'm still bitter they didn't get me a Daggard, even though they grew up with them." A picture of a Daggard appeared in Millie's mind, and she couldn't decide if it was a cat-like dog or a slinky raccoon. Millie settled on a fox and left it at that. Dalen smiled at Millie, nodded over to the buffet table, and offered an elbow to walk over and eat. Millie accepted. Passing by Mom, she got stopped. Millie's heart skipped, and she prepared to get grilled until Mom said in a whisper, "Remember Rule 1. Yeah, no wasties, no facies. She heard Dad say, "Hoop," to get Mom's attention. They communed on their parent-to-parent telepathy link, and Mom grabbed Millie's shoulder again. "Except the 21 bean green salad. Very small taste." "Why not?" "The greens are an alcoholic plant. They're very potent, like one bean." Millie and Dalen were accepted in line in front of Firth. When they got to the trays of warm and cold food, they took turns pointing what was what for Millie. There were stews of white things in red sauces and red things in violet sauces. There were fresh salads where leaves were shredded, cut, squared, then left to grow together for a little while. Millie politely avoided one of the pots of things that were moving until Dalen said it was part of the cooking. They were not still alive. Firth heaped his plate with the bean green salad. Dalen skipped it. Millie sat and felt her recent experience in the bathroom leave her shaky again. She poked at a couple things, reticent to taste much. Dalen leaned over. "I really recommend you try a couple of these," and slid cubes of clear gel onto her plate. Millie poked at them and gave Dalen a questioning look. "Really, just give them a try." Millie shrugged, scooped a few up. It was holding steam at the end of her fork with no weight and no smell. In her mouth, it tasted like eating mint. All of the mint, from the first leaf of mint as it evolved to the last piece of mint in the dying ember of the universe and every mint leaf in between. It continued to taste like all of the mint all the way down, and still tasted like all of the mint after it sat in her stomach for a minute, clearing out any of the sticky bits of being sick or the deep twists of being told such strange news. Then it stopped tasting like all of the mint. The same second it realigned her stomach. She burped the flavor of next Tuesday's lunch. Kendrell and Drawl applauded. "Those tech pie are fantastic, aren't they?" Drawl asked. Millie felt hollow and exhausted and famished. She started to laugh, wide-eyed and sniffing at her running nose. Her fingers tingled and her elbows were weak from such a release. "Those are wonderful." Everything on her plate became appetizing. They all sat and laughed and conversated. They went back for seconds and sat down for desserts. Millie even tried a turmeric lychee square, a small one. They listened to a dramatic reading of a letter from the attendees of the first Brentonne to the attendees of the last Brentonne. "Is this the last Brentonne?" Millie asked Firth. "No, but they read it every time, just in case. It's been said we have another Brentonne just to hear the letter again." Then it was Siggy Wistold's turn. He ascended the stage with, "There we were, overlooking a field of 30,000 protesters with nothing in reach but 2 hounds, a barrel of buttermilk, and this spoon." He held up a small, bent gold spoon to theatric gasps. Siggy looked a lot like Sluggy, but his hair was more orange and wilder, and his chest armor did not have such mountainous bulges. His story meandered and flowed, peaked and rested, building to an improbable climax. The assembled crazies went crazy when Dad, and Millie watched him get up from the table, so she was sure it was Dad, flung a large fish across the room. It hit Siggy square and true on the face. He fell dramatically and wiggled around on the floor. The crowd went nuts. Siggy got up and bowed. He was wiping his face when he announced to the room, "After that, I think we need a short poem." A voice came from one of the other tables. "The comparison!" There was a moment of silence before it was repeated. Then again, and yelled over and over. Siggy invited Dad up with a wave. "Professor!" Dad blushed. It's been a while. There were whistles and calls. Dad wasn't reluctant to do it. Millie could see he was reluctant to do it wrong. He waved his hands, asking everyone to settle for a minute. "I have to think of the words." They gave him the minute. Dad put on a voice Millie hadn't heard. It made the shelves dust themselves and the power surges think about blowing their fuses. It wasn't angry. It was unfiltered authority, control. Someone outside the door of the shop, in whatever world it was they had tethered to, slowed down to the speed limit, just because. It was the Dad voice, but fresh and undiluted from use. He used it to recite a poem he memorized long enough ago to forget, had he been able to. "I think about these words sometimes," he told everyone, "and they sound silly to me because it's so much a young kid in love, but it's still pretty accurate." He dramatically took a swig of water and cleared his throat. The assembled knowledgeable quieted and listened to the performance they requested. "We cannot move against time, its abstract and intangible self. We can only measure it, live through it, feel its sweep and flow. So we compare time to things knowable. A missed lover, the passing train. Time is the blue regret of sharply cutting judgment for opportunities gone forever. But we know time, each of us intimately, its passing age moving, given how it passes, so quickly and sporadically and expediently and efficiently in drifts and flows. We know it, and we know it is unequaled, unquestioned, unparalleled, unrelenting. Time is with us all. It has seen all things, all meanings, and all places. It is every change and every action and every movement. It is under distance. It is under way. Time is under all until it is over too soon. But time is not with me, has not held me close. I have had only one true companion. You are my time. Pushing me forward, leaving me behind, encompassing me presently, absorbing me forever. Without you, all the world is happenings that didn't happen, or matter that doesn't matter. You dull the edges of knives once used to stab my deep muscles, and grow new fields of yellow flower over boundaries of gray totems. You bury yesterday's scars in memory's fog and forgetful darkness, but cast light where it reflects brightest. You are the duration of my today, the terminus of all my paths, before and start of all to come. You are the sweep of the clock, the detachment of the now from the before, the unhitch of the moment as it uncurls its fingers to start its slow acceleration into the away. You bend the sides of my road to converge into a distant point and track alongside as the road moves into the long unknown. You post the coming engagements, challenging me to buy the ticket, and I will, so that I can see what new worlds you bring to me. Jules laughed to himself for a moment. enjoying his long gaze at Stoney through that last verse. Then he turned and spotted his daughter. Millie was not uncomfortable, as Dad said, to see which awesome new worlds you bring to me. The assembled crowd cooed and awed and felt good about their dinner and assembled camaraderie. "Bravo, Professor!" was yelled. "Lucky family!" was yelled too. There was a good time being had, and that was the point. So they carried on for a couple more hours as Millie listened and absorbed and had a good time too. Dalen talked and Firth talked and Millie listened. She leaned forward to hear more and leaned back to digest it. The table shifted and people sang. The table shifted and people danced. Dalen gave hugs before going home. To Millie, she whispered, "Call me if you need anything," and left. Millie's phone buzzed, and she looked down at a picture of Dalen and a long number on a new contact. She saved it. When it was his turn, Firth waved a little goodbye. "Did you have a good time? Was it everything you expected?" Millie thought about her strange, imagined meeting of a prince and trading that in for the dinner they enjoyed and the real people she met, some for the first time and some for the really first time. Different, kind of, almost. Then you know why they call it Brentonne. And he smiled and rejoined his family, heading out the door. The people dwindled, and Millie found a place between her parents and sat to listen some more. Then she leaned on her mom, and then her dad, then drifted into a light doze on the words that were simply hanging in the air. Millie was mostly asleep when Stoney started to rouse her to leave. "You have her?" Dad asked. Sluggy's voice boomed in a whisper of mom judgment over Stoney. "A sleeping child is never too heavy if you want to carry them." "Don't start, Sluggy," Stoney snapped. "Your 21-year-old is still weaning." "Ha! You are a horse." Sluggy kissed Stoney on the lips. "You keep taking care of her and bring her back soon." "That's up to her. We will try to convince her." Millie leaned on Mom, then felt folks give her rubs on the back and kisses on the cheek, even with her eyes foggy and her head on the soft of Mom's shoulder. They walked out of the shop. They went around the corner and up the stairs. The bow came out of Millie's hair and her shoes were off. Jules and Stoney, Dad and Mom, left the room dark. Hard sleep, bed sleep, came to Millie under her own covers and on her own pillow. This was Millie Salmon and the Infinite Shop, Chapter 11, The Almost Meal. In the next chapter, Millie suffers, just suffers, through Christmas. Thank you for listening. You can find more about Millie at milliesalmon.com or join us on Patreon. Please like, subscribe, and leave a review on whichever podcast app you use. Millie Salmon and the Infinite Shop is a production of Infinite Shop Limited, which you can follow on all social media platforms. I'm Ray Dubicki. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to reading some more for you soon.